everyone, welcome to Mama T's Kitchen. Today I'm going to talk to you about canning meats. I do lots of different kind of canning classes for people, and I decided to do this video. It's very amateur, but I wanted to have this a follow-up to my classes because it's a lot of information to take in, and I wanted to be able to do this video so that when my students go home and actually work on their own canning processes, that they will be able to have this video to look at to remind them on the things that they're supposed to do. So the first thing I'm going to talk to you about is the different kinds of products you'll need for canning. There's different types of pressure cookers. I have this All-American, which is a heavy-duty, wonderful pressure canner, but it's not absolutely necessary to pressure can foods. This one runs around $300, and then there's this little Presto canner, which is about $80. So you don't have to have the top of the line to be able to process your food. There's two types of canning: pressure canning, and there is a hot water method. My can over here is a hot water method. Now, pressure canning is done for meats and vegetables. You can do vegetables in the hot water method, but you must use like vinegar or lemon to add acidity to the products. So like your pickles you can process in a hot water canner, pickled beets, pickled green beans, anything that you pickle you can actually process in there, and that's a whole other story, so I'm not going to get into that, but I just wanted you to see the different kinds of canners. Now, pressure canning, again, is for meats and vegetables. And one nice thing to have when you're canning is to have all these wonderful little tools, and I have this nice pot here that I love to do my jams and jellies in. So this is just a little display of some of the things that you will need to pressure can. Okay, so when you're canning meat, the main meats that I can are chicken, pork, and beef. And you want to buy cuts of meat that are not very expensive because you are putting them into a pressure canner and you're going to be cooking them at like 250 degrees. So really the cheaper cuts are best. I think we got this chicken for $169 a pound, and it's chicken breast. It's my favorite to do. So what I'm going to do is show you, all you need for canning chicken is you need your jars. Now these are ball jars. They have Kerr jars and also Mason jars. You want to make sure they're official canning jars. If you don't use those, they can break in your pressure cooker, and that's a big mess. So make sure you have real canning jars. And then, let me turn off my water. And then you need to make sure you have lids and rings. Now this is your lid, and these are ball lids. You can also get Kerr, and these are rings. You use these one time. You use the lid, the lid one time whenever you can. And after you open your product, you throw that away. You never reuse them because they'll never seal again. You can reuse your rings if you want to, but just make sure that there's no rust on it and that it's, like I say, the ball or Kerr. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to fill up this chicken in these jars. And I'm doing what's called a cold pack method. I'm not cooking the food, and so I don't have to, I've washed all these bottles in the dishwasher, but I don't have to heat up the jars. If you're doing something like jam or pickles or something that you cook, you need to heat up the jars, and that's another class. I'll talk to you about that at another time. But right now I'm doing cold pack. So my jars here, I've just washed them and they're nice and clean. And I'm going to use this kind of salt. It's a Morton canning salt to process this meat. You have to use canning salt or a salt without iodine, because if you use just regular table salt, your meat will turn dark. So you want to make sure you get a canning salt. So for each one of these jars here, I am going to put 1 teaspoon of salt, so 1 teaspoon of salt in the bottom of each and every jar. When you're putting salt into your jars, these are pint jars, and so it's 1 teaspoon. If you were doing a quart jar, you would use 2 teaspoons of salt. And salt's very important in the processing, the preserving process. You have to use salt, or you can't guarantee that your product will be good. So now I'm going to put the meat into these jars. I have previously cut this up into little chunks of the chicken, into little chunks of meat. And when you're adding chicken to these jars, you need to make sure, first I love wearing these gloves because who wants to touch real meat? But when you're adding the chicken, you push it down, you pack it into the jars. Now you have to leave about 1 inch headspace because that's really important for the processing, the canning process. So I am packing this down. I'll have my cameraman kind of zoom in on there. So this is about 1 inch, and you see the bottom, there's a ring there, and I'm leaving plenty of room, and it's called headspace. And you have to leave that. If you don't leave a headspace, then your jars will not seal. So you want to make sure you do that. I'll do another jar, and then we'll come back after I get all these put in. Now, again, this is the same way for beef or pork. If you're doing that, you just make sure you leave the nice headspace. Okay, welcome back. So I put all my chicken in these little jars, these little pint jars. Made sure they had plenty of headspace. And now a very important thing to do before we put the lids on is to rub the tops of the jars. I take some white distilled vinegar and put it on a paper towel, and then we wipe the tops of these jars, because when you're putting the meat in, it can touch the tops, and there's fat, and the fat can cause your bottles not to seal. So you want to make sure you wipe them all really well. So we're going to wipe these off, and then we'll be back. One thing I wanted to show you is I've boiled some water here, and what we're doing now is we're preparing the lids and rings, because you have to put hot boiling water over our lids and rings, especially the lids. And we're gonna let this set for just a few minutes and soften up the little rubber part of the lids. So here we have it. You see it there? We're letting, one, we're sanitizing, and two, I can get this out without killing myself. There is these little orange rubber parts on the lids that need to be softened up. And you have to do this before you put them on your jars so that they'll seal. So make sure you do that. Okay, so I filled up my jars with my chicken, left plenty of headspace, and I have put my lids and my rings in hot boiling water. So now my lids are ready to be placed on the jars. And this is a very handy dandy little device you can buy. I buy all my stuff on Amazon. Just look for canning supplies. And we're going to set these lids on our jars. See how handy that is? It just set here so nice. Now, one thing you're probably saying, do we not add any liquid to the meat? No, there's no liquid needed, because you will see when I finish up how much liquid is made just from the chicken itself. And that's one reason, again, you need to leave some head space, because the chicken is going to have plenty of juice with it. And that's the same for pork and beef. You don't need to add any added liquid. So let's just put this on. Now, I'm going to add the lids on, or the rings. So this is the lid and this is the ring. So now I'm going to tighten the ring, and you don't have to jam it down. Just kind of give it a little tug, because if you tighten the ring too tight, you can actually break the seal of your jar. So you don't want to make it too tight. Just make sure it's on. Just a little tug and tighten it on. And I'm going to finish up these jars, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Thank you. What I'm doing right now is I'm preparing my canner to start pressure cooking. And when you pressure cook, you don't fill up your pressure canner all the way. Each of your pressure cookers you will get, and you have to read the information, will tell you to put 1 to 2, maybe 3 inches of water in the bottom. And that's what I've done with this pressure cooker here. I'm getting it ready to start pressure cooking. Okay, so I've got my pressure canners both on here. I'm going to do the pressure canning for both so that you can kind of see how these different canners work. Now you'll see down here I've got just about an inch or 2 of water, and I've put this tray in the bottom. You have to have a tray like this in your pressure canner. If you don't, your bottles will break. So you need to have one there. And if you look over here, up in this one, I've done the same. I have the little tray. All right, now, because we live in Las Vegas and we have hard water, I'm going to add just about maybe a tablespoon of white distilled vinegar to each of these. So as the chicken cooks, and when you get it out, you can take it out and the bottles will be clean, not covered in a white substance. You don't want all that hard water stain on there. So now I'm going to go over and I'm going to get some chicken and load up our pressure canners. Okay, so I'll have my cameraman come over here and look in here. I've put some jars in here. And one thing I wanted to show you with this canner, because it's so big, I can make double rows. But if you're going to do double rows, you need another lid like this. And now I'm going to put my jars in the canner like this. Alrighty. And then I just put a few bottles in this one here. Now we're going to talk about the lids of your pressure canners. The Presto lid has a rubber gasket like this, okay? And there's a couple of rubber items. There's a little, this is like an emergency spout that if it gets too hot, this will pop off and relieve the pressure. This thing here is part of the pressure gauge. When the pressure canner comes to the point where we're going to start timing, when it's up and going, this will pop up. And also on top of here is a little rocker, and I will also videotape when it starts to rock so you can kind of see how that works. And go ahead and step back here. I want to show you this one. Now this, one reason I like this pressure canner is that it doesn't have the rubber ring around it. It's tightened down with these little screws. It also has a couple of neat things. This has a little gauge here that tells you about pressure. Now, in Las Vegas, we need to have 15 pounds of pressure. And I can do this in 2 ways for this canner. I can watch it come up to 15 pounds, then I back off my heat and cook it at 15 pounds. I also have this weighted gauge. See, this kind of gauge can fail on you. It's not always accurate, and after a while it may not work at all. But it's okay, you don't need to have that. You have this, on here it says 5, 10, and 15, and once it's come up to where I want it, I put it on there at 15 pounds. This one kind of spins when it's ready. And when it gets to that point, we'll also videotape that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put the lids on the canners because I've got everything in. This one has a little arrow that lines up. And I'm going to turn this to the side like this. So everything is lining up, and I'm going to push this down and put the lid on. So I usually go from one side to another and tighten this down. I'll do this side as well. Get them all nice and tight. Tighten them all down. Now, you have to prime your pressure cookers, and by doing that is you bring them to a boil. And this little gauge here stays off at first. So I'm going to turn this on right now to high. We're going to start cooking. Now this little pressure cooker here, again, I'm taking the top weight, the weight off, and it has 15 pounds. There's 3 different rings on here, so it's at 15 pounds. And I'm going to, this one, it has a little V there and a little V there. You hook them up so this lid goes on. If I get it to work, maybe it needs to go this way. I always have fun trying with this. Come on, lid. There we go. So it's down, and then you just turn it. So both our lids are on. I'm turning the heat onto high right now. The reason I'm turning it on high is because we are priming our pressure cookers. We're going to get it to start boiling, and steam is going to start coming out of the tops here. And once that steam starts pouring out of that, we're going to time it for 10 minutes. So we'll stop right now, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, so I have got my 2 pressure cookers here, and you can see, if you zoom in here, my little cameraman, zoom in, you can see steam pouring out of there, and that's where we want to start doing this. This is kind of like priming them, I guess you might say. So now, because it's coming out, I'm going to go over to my timer, and I'm going to put 10 minutes on my timer. And what this does, it gets your pressure canner to the point, and I think one of the things we want to make sure is that these spouts where the steam is coming out, and this one's not quite going as much, but the steam comes out, you want to make sure that those spouts are not clogged, because if they're clogged, then you're going to have problems. You can actually, your pressure canner can blow up. And so there's a lot of bad raps about pressure canners, but if you do a thing, you read your directions, you do this, you make sure that the steam is coming out, and you watch your pressure canners. You can't start a pressure canner and then go to the store. That's a big no-no. You want to always be in the house and keeping an eye on them. And you can kind of see this one here is just starting to get a little steam coming out every once in a while. So I'm going to let this go for 10 minutes, and then I'll be back and we'll put the little pressure gauges on top. Thank you. Okay, so now we're back. You can see both of our pressure cookers are just steaming like crazy. I wanted to, one thing, when I start my pressure canners, I do put the temperature on high, mostly just to get the steam going. And then as it's going, if it's going really crazy, I will back it off. Like this one, I backed down to 4. This one's 4 as well, but the steam's still going. We've let it do this for 10 minutes. This is how it helps to get the pressure. Now I'm going to put the little weights on the top. Make sure you wear an UV glove or a really nice hot pad, because this is hot and you don't want to burn yourself. So I put that on there, and now I'm going to come over here. Again, this little one here, it says 5, 10, 15. I'm going to put it on the 15 mark because of our elevation. And so we'll put those there. Now, what's going to happen here is back here on this lid, you'll see this little one, watch it, it starts dancing. It's going to dance around here for a minute and then pop up. And once that happens, I'm going to turn down the heat a little more, and pretty soon we'll get the rocking motion at the top. It may take just a minute for it to do that. And while it's doing that, I want to just talk to you a little more about this pressure canner. This one I showed you, it has a rubber gasket and this little rubber thing here. You can, it depends on how much you use your pressure canner, but you will have to replace those gaskets every few years. I guess it depends on how much you use it, but I'm thinking between 3 and 4 years, maybe 5 years at the most. You need to replace those gaskets, or if you feel it's getting hard and it's not soft, you need to replace it. The only thing that I really would replace on here is I have one of those little rubber dillies back in here that I will have to eventually replace there. Again, I don't want you to be afraid of pressure canning. As long as you follow your directions and you watch your pressure canners, you don't let them go crazy hot, especially at this point. As soon as this little thing pops up and my little rocker starts to rock, I'm going to back off my heat. Right now I believe it's on 4. I'll probably back it off to about a 3 or between 3 and 2. I believe that's about where I do it. But the one reason I love canning my own food is one, especially with meats. I don't like to buy canned meats in cans because you never know, what's in there, first of all, what kind of preservatives they put in them. Is the can leaching anything off? I do it for food storage. There might be some preppers out there who love to do this. You can your meats and you can keep them on shelf. You don't have to put them in the fridge for up to 2 years. You don't want to keep them much longer. Although people say, oh, I've had canned items that I've had on the shelf for 30 years and ate them. No, I wouldn't recommend that. No, that's probably not. But there's a website. It's a National Home Food Preservation website. It's by the government that does it, and you can go to that website and get everything you ever wanted to know about canning. Fruits, vegetables, meats. I'll put a link on this video for you for that at this part so that you can read about it. It's taught me so many things. And of course, I've been canning since a little girl. When I was a little girl, I used to cut up and clean all the vegetables and everything that my mom would can. So, all right, folks. So this little pressure canner is now doing what it's supposed to do. It's starting to rock and it's a little fast, so I'm going to turn it down. I did turn it up a little bit to get it to this point. So I turned it back up to about 8, but now I'm going to back it off because that's even a little fast right now. You want it to do a soft rock. So I'm going to back it off just a little bit. But now I can time it. And when you have pint jars, you do them for 75 minutes. So I'm going to add this in here for 75 minutes. Then on this one, it's not quite ready. You want to zoom in on here. See on this little pressure gauge thing? It's about 10 minutes, so it's got to get to 15 pounds. Again, let's just talk to you about, I'm going to turn this down a little bit. See, it's still kind of a little too much for me. I don't want it going too crazy. That's one thing about, once your pressure canners are up and working, you don't want it too hot, and you want it just, this one, I love this pressure canner because it's just a gentle rock, and it's so easy to work with. This one, when it spins around, it's supposed to spin around 3 times in 1 minute. And it's kind of a pain to get it to where I want it to be. But one good thing is I have my little gauge over there. So we'll just let this go. I've got it started, this one timing. And then when this one starts, then we'll time it for 75 minutes. Again, if you're using quarts, it's 90 minutes. And remember one thing, never ever touch this or that until you've turned off the stove. This gauge has dropped to 0. This little tab here that came up, if you can zoom into there, this has to drop before you even open the canner. You never want to try and open the canner until all the pressure and it's cooled down. I want to show you a couple of things over here. This is some of my little canning projects. This is chicken. This is how it looks after you've done it. This is my pork and my beef. When you're doing pork and beef, make sure you cut as much fat off as you can. You don't want a lot of fat in there. You can see it still has a little bit, but that's okay. But it's wonderful. You can make enchiladas, soups, so many things. Tacos, I don't know. We do casseroles, all kinds of things. And then here's some green beans I did this year and some spaghetti sauce I did last year. All of these were done in a pressure canner because they're a low acidic food. This is pomegranate jelly because I have pomegranate trees. And this is some apricot jam that I did, and it's frozen because I decided to make frozen jam. And you can freeze in these jars, and this will last. I use a different type of pectin for both. For this apricot, for this pomegranate, I just use a simple, I like the little pectin in the yellow box, and I can't remember what it is, but that's what I use for that, just the powder. I found the powder in the yellow box, works the best. Then for this one I use Pomona pectin. You can use less sugar, half the sugar, and it tastes so fresh and good. I love it. But they don't last very long on the shelf. So this batch I put in the fridge to make sure it lasts longer, because sometimes they will actually turn dark on the shelf. They only last for about maybe 3-4 months. Where I'm hoping now that I put it in the freezer, it will last me a little longer. And then of course I have good old peaches here. And I've done pears. And these will, I find with the peaches and pears, you don't want to leave them on the shelf for more than about a year because they kind of start turning too. And they're okay, but you know, they just don't look as appealing to us. So it's, but I love having this. And I love having these on my shelf for emergencies or just going out and grabbing, you know, something fun that I've canned. I love my homemade spaghetti sauce. I add a little, I don't put meat in my spaghetti sauce. I have before. I have put some sausage and done it in the pressure canner, but I like to actually just put the fresh sausage in it. And but it's a good time. We're almost, look at here, zoom in on that one. It's almost to the 15 pounds. And in probably just a minute, we'll turn off the camera now for just a minute. And as soon as that starts taking off, I'll show you what it does. But see now here, see how soft this is? That's all you want your canner to be doing. This is a perfect rocking. Right now I have it, looks like it's a 3 on my stove. And it's exactly where I want it to be. And my timer's going on, or my timer, I've got it timed for 75 minutes. Okay, so our time's just about up on our small pressure cooker. My alarm's going to go off in just a couple of seconds. As you can see, are just kind of, this one is just rocking slowly. This one is doing it every, you know, I don't know, 10-20 seconds of doing its little rocking thing, which is perfect. It's showing 15 pounds. So what I'm going to do now, as soon as the alarm goes off, I'm going to turn off the heat to this. This one over here still has 6.5 minutes to continue on, and when it's done, I'll turn off the heat to that. And so this is off. And now I'm not going to touch this. I'm going to let it totally cool off. And let me take the camera here. My cameraman had to leave, so I'm going to take the camera here and show you this little part right here. When that drops, that means that it's time to take the lid off, and then I will take this off and pop the lid. Otherwise, I'm not going to touch this. We don't want to touch this until this drops. Then I take this off and pop the lid. On this one, I'll wait till the pressure drops down to 0. That's one nice thing to have in a dial there. Once it drops down to 0, then I'll take off this little thing here and we can open the lid. So I will see you in, it's going to take, I would say, a good 2 hours to totally cool down. It does take some time. Canning is not something you do quick and easy. Okay, so I turned off the canners about an hour ago, and they've dropped down. You can see over here, this one is down to 0. And our little, the little valve here has popped down. That means it's okay to open the pressure canners. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to take this top part off. And you pull it off and you see there's no steam coming out, so that is a good thing. I'm going to turn this around and open it facing this way so the steam can come out of the pressure canner. There we go. Then this one, I'm going to take the top part off, and on this one I have to tighten all the knobs. And again, I'll open this away from me as best I can. I'll have to turn it a bit. There we go. Set this over here. And I'm ready to take out my jars. One of the most important things in canning, you need to have a bottle catcher like this, because this will bring you over, and you can pull out these really hot jars. And you'll notice here, I told you how I put the vinegar in the drawers so the jars look really nice and clean. If you don't put a little vinegar in your water, your jars can be covered in a white film, and just a little bit of vinegar makes a difference. So pull all these out. I'm going to have these all sit here. I'm not going to touch them for like 12 hours until they totally cool off. Then I will put the can date on the top so that we know when their expiration time comes. And I'll have my cameraman zoom in here. You can see the chicken, and it's still bubbling. Can you see that? How it is still, it's so hot. And it's been over an hour since, I've turned off the heat, but it's just bubbling away. But I hope you have enjoyed this little video. Canning is, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. I would say we started this around 2 and in the afternoon, and now it's almost 7. So it does take some time, a little bit of patience, but it's well worth it. Now we have some food to put on our shelves to have, and it's very easy. When you want to make a chicken salad, you just pull out some chicken and make up your chicken salad, or whatever it is you want to make with your chicken. And signing off. Thank you. Okay, so one thing about canned food is you want to make sure that it's sealed. And as I look here at my jars, if you bring the camera over, you can see that all these lids are like kind of concave. There's a little button at the top of these lids, and all of them are, the little circle has gone down. If you've canned something and after they've cooled, if you feel movement in the lid, that means it didn't seal, so you need to put them in the fridge. Don't put them on the shelf. Make sure that they're totally sealed, that there's no movement when you touch the top. Okay, and then you can store them for 2 years. All right, I wanted to thank my cameraman, Thomas. He's my grandson, my cute grandson, and he's been my director